the real deal is taking a whole nation's collateral under your control, being able to issue loans on the basis of that collateral to your clients. So not publicly or state-owned Venezuelan oil company PDVSA, but to your clients, BP, Shell, ExxonMobil, and so forth. Issuing loans to the Venezuelan state, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, can I add one piece to your formula, your alchemist formula? Is the tax slavery of the citizenry that has to repay everything.
Yes, of course, because they are ultimately the ones who are going to be repaying this.
Correct.
This is why every colony everywhere in the world is a miserable dump.
I didn't understand at the time. I don't think most of us did, but it was a recognition that feudalism was the only system that worked, and that it needed to be dramatically upgraded and updated with all the tools and capabilities that we were developing. But the only system that is a counter to this tyrannical centralization of power and control, unaccountable power and control, is the decentralization of feudalism. And to that, you have to have a strong nobility.
Traveling to a restrictive country with internet censorship? A VPN is the answer. And surf the internet with no restrictions.
My wife and I have been happily married for over 25 years. However, there's no stopping the march of time and the slow, steady decline in testosterone level. Luckily, I've discovered a natural, safe herbal formula that boosts testosterone levels. My wife and I are still happily married, but she now complains that I'm being a bit of a nuisance. You too can be a nuisance by boosting your testosterone levels naturally. Go to bit.ly/CryptoRichBoost and boost your testosterone levels today. Hey, EM. Hey, Alex. Thank you so much, guys, for agreeing to this and doing this and coming back on my channel. It's Wednesday, the 15th of October at 20 to 7. I think the last time we did this was maybe about 6 weeks ago, perhaps a bit longer. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But you're both regular guests on my channel, for which I'm grateful and I appreciate. Do you just want to say a little bit about who you are, why you are, and where people can find you?
Which one? Okay.
Well, so, I'll defer to you, Alex. Age and beauty before whatever
I'll start then. So you said it was 15th of October, and I thought, like, where the hell did the summer go? I have 2 publications on Substack. One is daily market newsletter called iSystem Trend Compass. The other one is my personal blog type newsletter called Alex Krainer's Substack. And I'm also active on X under the handle @NakedHedgie. So that's my 3 main platforms where I'm most active, and then you can find the rest from there.
Yes. And you can also regularly find Alex on my channel.
That's right.
Yes, he's gracious enough to appear here. EM.
Yeah, so some books on Amazon on various topics, and then ianburlingame.substack.com, where I do some, not market analysis, but geostrategic, domestic strategic analysis. Just fair warning, I do swear. Former infantry guy. And then, like Alex, I'm active on Twitter, trying to stay in the flow of the dialogue, shall we say. Yeah. And every once in a while, just to be fair, I have a little wine or scotch and I speak inappropriately, but draw something to people's attention. Yeah.
No problem. Well, great to have you. And I'll have the links to your profiles and stuff in the description below. And I just want to say that I think in a week or so's time, Ian, we're recording a video with Graham Moore from the English Constitution.
Yeah.
And then also, Alex, on Friday, the 17th of October, we're recording with Susan Kokinda and Tom Luongo, who I think you may have heard of. So people should watch out and subscribe, comment, like. Yeah.
Possibly. That name rings a bell.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Now, Ian, you suggested that I get both of you on together. And if I recall, it was to talk about what's happening with the monarchy or the crown. Is that right?
Well, that's part of it. But how is the war evolving?
Okay.
Right? Since
people,
Alex.
Sorry, Ian.
Go ahead.
Forgive me. For people who don't know, perhaps new subscribers or they're new to this conversation, do you want to delineate what you mean by the war? Which war are you talking about?
the Westphalian world is ended.
Okay.
And we're negotiating out, it's the Westphalian world on continental Europe, and then it's the inglorious revolution in the English-speaking world. It's the same effort, 1600s, and that world is done. It's gone. And quite frank, the world ended in the 90s.
Okay.
Right, sometime in the early to mid 90s, and now we're getting into the final decade of the culmination fights over how does everything reorganize itself and what system actually gets put in place to, do the same people get to put such an abusive, extractive slavery system in place again, or do strong, powerful people stand up and say, yeah, you're not doing that to us again?
Yep. And then to put it another way, because one of the things I've really enjoyed talking with you, EM, not talking about you, but talking with EM is, and I've said this a couple of times, why couldn't history have been this interesting when I was at school? And it was deliberately not interesting, so we wouldn't know about where we come from and what our legacy is, and wouldn't be able to access our historical power, and people in Britain aren't taught about the Bill of Rights. But put another way is that what we're talking about is a war between the Anglo-Dutch banking system, the City of London, versus the sovereigntists. And the City of London, the Anglo-Dutch, have been ruling over the world for far too long using their extractive model, which has deprived people of finance and liberty and livelihoods and lives. And now we have a war where the sovereigntists are coming to the fore.
Well, they're trying to.
They're trying to, yes.
Yeah, and they're trying to put which they tell us openly about. They've been trying, so it's not like they tried over the last 30 years to deceive us or lie about what their intents were. They told us at Davos. They had this whole PR marketing thing. They tried to convince us in all these very expensive ways and very fancy ways that this was in our best interest. Now we're at the point where we've told them no, and they're a little peeved about that, violently peeved about it.
And who are the agencies that represent the globalists?
Unfortunately, it's not so easy as what are the agencies. It's, what are the ancient factions going all the way back to Rome? And this is an exaggeration, right? What are the ancient factions that are, that had a stake in the New World Order, shall we say? And I'm not too keen on that term, right? But, it's more about factions, and then how are who are the operatives of those factions, and what institutions are they embedded in?
Okay.
Right. It's less about, no, I mean, there's some we could point to, et cetera, but then people are going to come and argue and fight, et cetera. But, everything that we are dealing with specifically in the world today, outside of certain things in the Far East and Southeast Asia and Central Asia, but in the Eurosphere and Anglosphere, all really began with the 1054 schism.
Okay, the 1054 schism.
Which was the was the creation of the Roman Catholic Church, which was the Second Rome. And then it fostered over the next centuries the Crusades, which destroyed 90% of the kingdoms and principalities that were destroyed were Orthodox Christian principalities and kingdoms. And to such a degree that the Fourth Crusade finally defeated the capital and the Eastern Empire, the former Roman Empire, the actual legitimate, Roman Empire. The Fourth Crusade sacked Constantinople. So what we are dealing with is really, specifically, and when you say institutions and organizations, et cetera, is the ones that have come out of the 1054 schism formally. But we're really still fighting the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312. And we're still fighting the same Praetorians out of Rome from 30 AD or 30 BC.
Okay. Ian, you've said a few things here that I've not heard you say before, right? And I do want to bring us up to speed with the state of the war today, right? So that might be another conversation. So I'm gonna say a few things, right? So that to bring people up to speed as well. And actually told you to kind of simplify it, so I make sure that I'm keeping up with you. So with the Fourth Crusade, they sacked Constantinople. The Venetian bankers moved over to the Netherlands, camped there. They put a lot of money into the
couple hundred years later. Yep.
Right? They lost a lot of money. They were setting up England in the meantime. as a bolt hole, they came to England. William of Orange became the monarch with his wife Mary. They incorporated the City of London as a separate entity, separate from England. They incorporated the Bank of England in 1694, and ever since then we've had the City of London using financialization to reach out with its tentacles and enslave and impoverish and plunder the rest of the world. And now what's happening, it's coming to an end because there are sovereigntists, we call them that, maybe, I don't know, there are...
It's not why it's coming to an end, though. So everything you're saying is correct. The reason it's coming to the end is because there's not enough Englishmen, that's including Scots and Welsh and Irish, etc. There aren't enough Englishmen available to send to foreign wars to, enforce the business finance dealings of the bankers, right? The title property owners.
Right.
So once the people no longer have the manpower to fight on that scale, they are taken, that society, civilization is taken through collapse, and their populations are mixed with foreigners so that they can never reconstitute themselves later because they're constantly, and this is from where Alex comes from in Eastern Europe. This thing goes back to Rome. Rome intentionally mixed populations so that they would have little levers they could turn up and down to have ethnic conflict, as Alex talks about so very well. That goes back a couple thousand years. The Romans were doing that, and oh, by the way, the Greeks were doing it too, right? Spartans, etc. So this is a thing that goes back a long ways. So when a people no longer have the young men available to go fight and die to execute contracts, right? Then those people are abandoned. Their lands are confiscated and taken in all kinds of ways, and they're flooded with foreigners that hate them and enemies, so that they'll never be able to reconstitute themselves to come back and kill you for what you've done over the last few centuries, because you're going to be caught up in, very much as Alex says so very well, you've got an ant jar now for the next 1,000 years.
Yeah, and this is exactly what's happening in the UK and in Europe with the
across all of Europe, but also all of the English-speaking world.
Yeah, Canada, New Zealand, Australia.
Yeah.
Okay, Alex, I'm going to bring you in here.
Yes. What would you like to know?
Alex, what would I like to know? Okay, where is the lost city of Atlantis? What's the formula for making gold at home?
Crypto.
In the meantime,
here's how you make gold. I'll explain. It's alchemy. Basically.
Thank you.
Basically what you do. For example, I'll just give you an example. You have this country called Venezuela, which has 3 billion barrels in proven oil reserves, which is a lie, but everybody pretends that it's the truth, and it works. And so Venezuela has a very nasty, undemocratic, evil, dictatorial, tyrannical, narco-trafficking government, which we would very much like to topple and to bring in a very humanitarian, democratic government headed by Nobel Prize winner. Nobel laureate.
Woman.
A woman.
Yeah. A woman of color, right?
A woman of color, Latina, Latinx, right?
Good Catholic. Yeah.
Catholic. Ticks all the boxes almost.
Is she lesbian? Do we know?
I don't know.
Okay.
But if we were able to put her in the Miraflores Palace in Caracas, then she could bring back democracy and human rights to the Venezuelan people. And yesterday she gave a very inspirational and compelling interview with Donald Trump Jr., talking about wonderful things for the Venezuelan future and how much money American companies could make when she opens the country and privatizes everything. So here's how you make money. You take political control of a country and you open it to foreign banks and foreign companies. And so now you're going to have foreign companies going to develop Venezuela's oil sector, right? Companies like BP and Shell and ExxonMobil and so forth. And these companies are going to need a lot of money to develop the oil sector, right? They're going to need massive loans. And basically, they're going to get it from their banks. And their banks, which will be, things like Citigroup and JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and, these types of banks, they're going to give them those loans, and they're going to secure them with Venezuela's oil reserves. And Venezuela itself as a state is going to need a lot of money, many, many loans, which they will obtain because they will be able to secure them with Venezuela's oil and gold. So just by taking political control of a country, that country's natural resource wealth suddenly becomes profitable assets on your balance sheets, because now you get to issue loans, you get to fuel a whole new credit cycle because there's new collateral in the system. While there's nasty Maduro in Caracas, you don't get the gold. If you bring the Nobel laureate Machado, you get the gold. And so, just to give people an idea, because I wrote about this a few months ago in April, when Rockefeller interests from New York got the Alberta oil reserves under their control, and we are talking about, again, a lie, but everybody pretends that it's true, 175 billion barrels of proven oil reserves in Alberta. Once they got control of that collateral, they were able to turn it into $9 trillion of new assets, of new loans. And the bulk of that then was used to inflate the housing bubble of the early 2000s, about $5 trillion. And then when the bubble burst, the bankers have the state by the balls, because if the banks go under, the whole economy grinds to a halt. It's politically extremely toxic. So when the bubble burst, they turned to the state and said, you have to bail us out or else. So the state bailed them out. The minimum by the government accounting office was $16 trillion. So the banks got a $16 trillion in bailouts. That's the minimum government accounting office, which means that reality, you can probably double it. $29 trillion. That's that's independent estimates by other experts. So it's not just American banks. The bailout money went to Swiss, French, British. It went Japanese banks. So it's the global banking cartel. It's not just our banks, our economy. It's really like a mafia that is having us all hostages. Okay. Anyway, so how much money is that? If we take the $16 trillion figure, that works out to about $42,000 per man, woman, and child living in the United States. That's how much money they got out of that deal. And that is so big, it eclipses, people talk about, oh yeah, like if they go to war in Venezuela, the military-industrial complex, they're going to make money, and the big oil, they're going to make money, and blah, blah, blah. This is all the crumbs off the table of what the real deal is. The real deal is taking a whole nation's collateral under your control, being able to issue loans on the basis of that collateral to your clients. So not publicly or state-owned Venezuelan oil company PDVSA, but to your clients, BP, Shell, ExxonMobil, and so forth. Issuing loans to the Venezuelan state, again secured with that same collateral. that's the main, that's the biggest thing.
So,
And so, go ahead.
Yeah, can I add one piece to your formula, your alchemist formula?
Yeah.
Is the tax slavery of the citizenry that has to repay everything.
Yes, of course, because they are ultimately they are the ones who are going to be repaying this.
Correct.
Of course, this is why every colony everywhere in the world is a miserable dump where people are deliberately and systematically plunged into poverty. The infrastructure basically collapses, breaks apart. The country becomes deindustrialized. Simply, you have export of raw materials. That's it. And so this has been the colonial system, and it's been managed this way for centuries. It's been with us for centuries now. Yeah, at least. Yeah. And so this is how you make gold. And not only that, once upon a time, in the time of the East India Company and the Dutch East India Company, they actually raised their own armies. And they, if there were any uppity people who didn't agree with this, then they would send their own army. But that was, you're doing stuff for profits and paying for the whole army units that cost a lot of money. So they decided it's clever to infiltrate the halls of power and then get the taxpayer to pay for the military. So today
and fight.
Fight. That's right. Yeah. So today you have the American military, which is saber rattling in the Caribbean Sea against the Venezuelan people, the Venezuelan state, right? And if they manage to stage a coup, if they manage to regime change Venezuela, the main beneficiaries are going to be again this global banking cartel. And you can almost tell from this case that it's not really Trump. Because again, Trump is the guy that's the most visible, the loudest guy, and everybody's Trump, Trump, Trump. But one of the things that Trump wanted, for example, was to get the Nobel Prize for Peace as a recognition of his efforts to broker peace in all these different places, but most importantly in the Middle East. And instead, the Venezuelan opposition leader got the Nobel Prize for Peace. How do you explain that? So obviously, Trump...
It's a reverse Uno card.
Yeah.
The financialists played a reverse Uno card.
Exactly. Trump didn't get what he wanted. Obviously, his desire was a distant second to the desire of the banking cartel. And now somehow the U.S. military is exerting pressure on Venezuela. We also know at least one group in that very probably is the Rockefeller interests, because already since 2003 we had Aaron Russo enlighten us a little bit about this, because he said he told in one of his interviews how he befriended Neil Rockefeller. And they became personal friends. They would visit each other and have dinners together and talk about all kinds of everything. And in one of his conversations, the Rockefeller informed him that there would be an event. He was referring to 9/11. This happened before 9/11. He said there would be this event. And then on the back of that event, they would launch a global war on terror. And it would be really cool because there isn't a real enemy. So you could just go everywhere and intervene and pretend that you're fighting terrorists. And that they would also, so he said we were going to go to Afghanistan, but he also said that they would go to Venezuela. And then we had a coup in Venezuela attempted in 2003, it didn't work. Then we had another attempt in 2019, and now apparently we have another attempt. But so the pressure, to my mind, is not coming from Trump; it's coming from the banking networks, from exactly the same groupings that we've been talking about since the beginning of this chat. And Trump is their either willing or reluctant servant. And the reason why I believe that he's their reluctant servant is because the last time around, he made all the right noises, but he didn't really get the job done. So they did the whole thing. They recognized Juan Guaido as the legitimate president. Trump had him at the White House, pat him on the back. You're the real president. We recognize you. They did the whole show, but then Trump assigned the whole project to John Bolton and Elliot Abrams. And I don't know if you could have if you can find two worse people to assign such a project. And obviously they failed and nothing happened, and Maduro is still in power. And another reason why I think he's not sincere is Trump, because he sent like 8 ships and 6,000 troops. And I think that if you wanted to take down Venezuelan government, you would have to probably go with at least 250,000 troops.
What if your enemy is not the Venezuelan government? What if you're not signaling the Venezuelan government? What if your signaling is the intelligence community that uses Venezuela as a base?
Oh, yes, I agree with that. And that's a very interesting angle, because one of the things that happened during the Biden administration is that Biden sent a delegation to Venezuela, to Maduro. I forget what year it was, but it was a very, I think it was mid or early 2022, very, very soon after the special military operation started in Ukraine, because the Americans were like, okay, we're going to need heavy oil, and we need to talk to the Venezuelans, because that's the closest, most abundant source we have. So they made deals. They had long, elaborate discussions, and they made deals. And some of those deals were not disclosed. And Venezuelan officials said that, well, it wasn't just oil. We discussed all kinds of things. But one of the things that they discussed may have been this sudden influx of all kinds of bad people from Venezuela into the United States, because one of the other agendas that the Biden administration had was to bring all kinds of social trash from everywhere into the United States. So suddenly the Venezuelans are like, okay, that's what you want. Fine. We're emptying out our prisons, and all these gangs and drug traffickers and narco terrorists, you can have them. They're on their way. And that was a Biden administration request.
That was the bankers.
That's the bank. And who was Joe Biden? Joe Biden didn't know where he was.
He's a sock puppet.
He was a sock puppet, but who was the puppeteer? It was Barack Obama.
Yes.
Who went to
just
London?
in Downing Street.
Yeah, exactly. Who just went to London yesterday or the day before?
Yeah.
It was Barack Obama. Why is Barack Obama going to? Yeah,
not just London. He went to 10 Downing Street.
Yeah.
He meant
why was Barack Obama? Yeah. Why was Barack Obama there? He's no longer president. The president. Why? But are they
Hatch Act questions, by the way?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So Trump's doing something there, but I'm not exactly sure what.
Okay, so
So
you Alex, you have this big brain, and you were chilling and resting earlier, so you've got some energy. Because I've been trying to, I'm not a clever guy. I just look at things for a long time till they kind of make sense. Okay, let's assume that. Okay, so one assumption we've discussed before, that Qatar was the new headquarters, is the new headquarters for what I call the Devil's Legions, but basically it's the intelligence and special operations units of the of the financialists, or the Praetorians, right? Okay, and Qatar's been the headquarters there. 99.99% of Hamas's funding comes out of Qatar, and Al Jilani's funding comes out of Qatar, and all this stuff, right? Okay, but the banking center, the financial center, everything's nice and Teletubby style is in UAE. Okay, well that's the Eastern Hemisphere, so to speak. You're going to have a mirror in the Western Hemisphere, and if you're getting pushed out of the United States, where are you going to put your equivalent of Qatar, right? All of your paramilitary headquarters, and where are you going to put your banking headquarters? Because you want those in two separate places, right? You want two separate faces on those things. Okay. Well, Venezuela, let's just say that Venezuela is the Qatar of the Western Hemisphere. And if you look at it closely, you see, yeah, pretty much. We created the government there. We own the government there. We own most of the governments in South and Central America, because where we've been doing coups and color, as Americans specifically, where have we been most heavily focused since the 1950s on coups and color revolutions, and actually all the way back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, the whole Monroe Doctrine. And if you read War is a Racket by General Smedley Butler, right? Okay, so let's say that Venezuela's Qatar, and that's where, this Praetorian-owned Devil's Legions are headquartered for the Western Hemisphere. Well, you're going to have to take that, if you're going after the Praetorians, the bankers, this old banking cabal system, and you're going after their paramilitary and intelligence capabilities, the Devil's Legions, you're going to have to take Venezuela off the table. Okay, now, you don't want to do an invasion. You don't want to do all that kind of stuff, because very much that feeds into the narrative and the argument that you've made, which is why I think, and this is where I could use a bigger brain like yours to help me, what I believe they did by giving this lady, and again, I'm kind of trying to figure out how to articulate this because I could see it. Okay, here's what I believe. What I believe is that we were making the right moves to move against the hidden shadow forces, our own hidden shadow forces in the City of London's hidden shadow forces that are secretly in control of Venezuela. And we were hitting them. We showed them that we'd hit them where it hurts, that we would use U.S. military assets to hit intelligence assets, which is what those fast boats were. We'll hit your funding lines. We'll hit your weapons trail, all this covert, clandestine kind of warfare kind of stuff. Okay. What did the Praetorians just do? They just gave a Nobel Prize to a lady who's all about liberal democracy. And now we're in this trap. We don't really want Venezuela. We don't care about Venezuela. The oil is sludge. I mean, it's quite literally sludge-grade oil. They have to actually put diesel in it to get it to go through pipes. And then they have to extract the diesel out of it on the other side of the pipe. It's crap oil, and we used to process it in Houston, but since Maduro and all of that, we retooled the refineries here. We can't use the oil anyways. It's crap. Take a huge amount of it. So anyways, point is that my suspicion is that we were making all the right pressure moves on Venezuela against these covert, clandestine paramilitary forces that have been in control, not wanting to overthrow the country, because we're not about, the way in which we remove this now 400-year-old parasite is you don't keep overthrowing countries. You pressure it, you go after it, and then you stabilize the country so that it can stand on its own and clear this out and root this out, etc. Okay, well, what they do, then they take this lady, they give her the Nobel Peace Prize, she's a liberal democracy, and it's a trap to try and draw Trump, and us, the American people, into a war, an actual war with Venezuela, when that was never our intention. Our intention was the pressure and stress. Same thing we're going to do in Mexico, right? And we're getting similar kind of reactions out of Mexico. We don't want to overthrow Mexico. We don't have, quite frankly, we don't have the martial capability. We could overthrow it. That's easy. I mean, we literally, a couple of weeks, Mexico's done, right? We've overthrown Mexico, but we don't have the manpower to occupy it. And we don't want to occupy it in any kind of capacities we might have had to occupy anything. We burned in the global war on terror, which was done on purpose, right? So my suspicion is that, and please help me, see it better or tell me where I'm wrong, is that they just played a reverse Uno card. It's like, okay, you want to pressure in Venezuela? We'll play, but you got to invade it. And we're going to invade it for the natural resources and for the business. Why? Because now he gets all the bankers and the business people and everybody else behind him and pressuring and forcing, and then you get the bleeding heart. Well, it's liberal democracy and all that stuff. I don't think he's going to fall for it. Now, how the hell he gets out of it? How the hell does he do that dance so that we don't invade frickin' Venezuela, right? Which is no small task, by the way. And let's be quite frank: the U.S. military, despite what Hexas trying to do, we can't field one healthy combat division right now, and we sure as hell can't sustain one.
Well, yeah,
Alex,
exactly.
Before we come in, let me just add something. So Ian, that was brilliant what you said, and Alex, what you said as well, and how you clearly delineated how the financialization, imperialism,
the alchemy, yeah.
Yes, that's very good.
And I love you for that too, Alex, because I've been thinking that as well. The alchemist dream succeeded. It's just got a lot more steps,
It's just-
and it has very little to do with lead, actually.
Yeah, I was thinking.
No, you need the key ingredient is blood. Blood is
It's
the key
blood,
ingredient.
human blood.
I was hoping something with mud or whatever, add some water, and then I'd have gold.
Well, no, well, the blood spills into the mud and
Oh, no, I'm
whatever.
not gonna do
yeah,
that.
yeah. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's
Rich.
fine. What I was going to add is what Tom's been saying, and I was just haven't listened to his market report, which he posts on Wednesday and Sundays to his subscribers, and I think he said it in a few podcasts he's done recently, which is that what Trump is going after are the drug cartels as a
Yes.
source of funding for the deep
Yes.
state.
Yes.
And then what you said, Ian, it's not typical. Trump is not for mass invasions of countries.
They
That's
don't work.
how he operates.
They don't
He's
work.
done that anyway. Well,
You
he
can't
posted that.
root this problem out with invading a country. They just shift in they're like a parasite. They're a
Yeah.
virus.
But
Yeah,
also,
yeah, yeah,
it's not even
yeah.
how he operates. You know, like George Bush,
Yes,
we're going to
yeah,
invade
yeah,
everybody
yeah.
or whatever, right? Petraeus, we're going to send more troops into Afghanistan. Doesn't work.
Retards.
Didn't
Yeah.
work. Didn't work. Ain't going to work.
Well, it accomplished the task it was supposed to accomplish, though.
Okay.
Right, which was chaos and destruction and taking over all the Islamic terrorist organizations and command of all of that, etc. So it worked for what they were trying to accomplish.
Yes. And Trump,
Right.
either that's not how he operates, or
No.
that's not what he's out to accomplish, because he has used, I suppose, violent actions, but at a minimal, like the killing of Soleimani, the bombing of the Iranian nuclear strikes. And then he talks a lot of bluster, which throws people off kilter. They lose their rag, and they think, oh my God, Orange Hitler. And then he doesn't.
But this goes back to the first conversation, the only conversation I think the three of us have had before, is the sport of kings supersedes the great game. And everybody I listen to, virtually everybody, except for you, Alex, you're the only one that touches on it here and there and more. But you're the only one that's communicating here and there that, oh, maybe there's another thing going on here that's a higher level thing. Well, the great game is what everybody's been conditioned to for the last 400 years, where we've had no kings, right? It's the whole purpose, actually. And I disagree with Tom on this, what he says about the no kings thing, that it's about Trump being Lincoln and all that. Maybe some of that's, no. I mean, quite literally, the enemy is afraid of the return of kings.
Yes.
Because kings are and strong nobility, not just kings. You need the nobility as well, right? With their own men at arms, their own intelligence, their own self-sufficient economics, all of that, because they are the only countered oligarchy. Plato talked about this, right? This has been talked about for thousands of years. So Trump's doing what he needs to do to play the sport of kings, which is what? You have to constantly disrupt the great game of management and this vast managerial class that's virtually everything that we see, right? And so a lot of that, the thing is that the other handful of kings on earth, Putin, Xi, and I think His Majesty King Charles III, they hear it. They hear the signal in all of that noise, the signal they need to hear, and they're all in an agreement. They're all in an accord. This 400-year-old hidden alchemist slavery, or the alchemist slavery, has got to end. And I believe very firmly, very fundamentally, that when they assassinated the Kennedys so openly, so brazenly, and so openly hid it, the few handful of powerful families and people on earth said, we have got to end. This thing is going to end, and we are going to end it. And it's taken us 60 years to get into this position and place to be able to do it. And that's what we're seeing.
Ian, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I want to know why you think that Charles is a king for real. Because my impression for a very long time is that he's simply a puppet in the hands of the money lending oligarchy.
Yes.
And I'll tell you the reasons why I think that. Well, it's not much, obviously.
He is, but he isn't. But yeah, please. Yeah, sorry.
There's this famous photograph of Evelyn Rothschild poking him on the chest.
Yep.
Which, kind of my understanding that breaks the protocol.
Yep.
And another one is that, we now have actual proof that King George V was put to sleep.
Yep.
And I think that Queen Elizabeth was put to sleep as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So why I want to know more about why you think that Charles is for real.
Okay. Wonderful question. So something I've written on extensively, the Praetorian problem. knives at your throats from the time you're born in the palace.
And the Praetorians, for people who don't know, because it was it was unfamiliar until you and I started talking about it. You started mentioning it. Are the bodyguards?
Well, they're not so much. Okay, so that's just the muscle. The Praetorians are, even in Rome, weren't just the muscle. They were the guys that they were the bankers of the time. They were the power of the time. Everything filtered up to them. The guys with the swords and, you know, what we call the Praetorian Guard, which is today I call the Devil's Legions because they've evolved so far beyond just palace guard, right? Which is the cartels and the traffickers, and it's Hezbollah and Hamas and all these other, you know, and ISIS and all these other things. So, Alex, to your point, when the Dutch army came over in 1688 with William of Orange, it wasn't to subdue the English people. It wasn't sufficient for that. It was to make sure that the king was in, and the other people in power and the nobles never got out of line. And every time we have to go back and look at the last 300 something, and I'm Scottish and English, right? Scandinavian descent on both sides, but I am through and through a Scots-Irish, you know, Scots-Englishman, right? So I can't speak too much terribly to Europe. What I can speak to is the British Isles, right? Or what become known as the British Isles and the histories there. Okay. When we look back with this kind of, okay, so there's been a Praetorian problem since Charles II, right? Since Charles II. And in a way, the problem already goes back to Charles I, because how the hell was he deposed? How was he beheaded? All of that, right? So it goes back even further. But this, specifically 1688, then you start looking at the decimation of the nobility. You look at the deaths of some of the royal children and some of the family members, and then very much His Majesty King George V, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Lady Diana, all of these things. There's a pattern that the Praetorians would do, is that when an emperor was no longer of value to them, they would kill the emperor so that it was a message to the next emperor: we can kill you, stay in line.
Yeah.
Right? And the problem that this is an old thing. This is a mafioso thing, by the way. This is a, you know, the Cosa Nostra kind of knowledge thing. And I might not have gone to school with a couple of those guys when I was back in private schools. And in La Cosa, well, I can't speak to them directly, but, you know, in that world, there's an understanding that there is a propensity for old people, men and women, but particularly old men, to get a conscience towards the end of their life. And it's better to kill them before they get that conscience. Right? And then pass on, and then that serves a dual purpose. One, you make sure all that shit, you know, the sins of the father don't come out in the open. And then the second thing is you're threatening the next generations, stay in line or we'll kill you. Right? So given all of that, right, and we can read history, this has happened in other courts, this has happened, right? Okay. Would they not have been shaping the public appearance and image and perspective of Charles from the moment he was born, probably even before he was born?
Yeah.
Would they not have intentionally made sure there was photographs with him, with this pedophile frickin' BBC guy? Would they not make sure that it looked like he was suborn to a Rothschild? Rothschilds are nobodies in the great power game. They're just management. They're upper management, but they're just frickin' management, right? Would they not carefully craft that whole, you know, concept and idea of him? And some monarchs, some nobles are just going to go along with it because they're weak. But look at Charles when he was younger, especially when he went away to boarding school in Scotland, etc. Now, how it's articulated in some ways is totally different, but he rebelled. He rebelled quite a bit. And who did he go to? He went to Uncle Dickie, Edward VII, His Majesty Edward VII. And why did Edward VII abdicate? Because of some divorcee? If you read their private letters, she didn't want to marry him. They didn't, right? He quit. He didn't want to be playing this game. He didn't want to be used in this way. He didn't want to have a sword of Damocles over him every minute. So he quit. And he used her as an excuse and fostered the whole thing. So the point I'm getting at is this. People, I keep hearing people every day, I get it every day, every single day. Well, they should just fall on their sword. It's like, what the hell is that going to do? How is that going to improve anything or impact anything? At least they're staying in the fight the best that they can. And I suspect, this is my suspicion, okay? And I just saw something yesterday, just totally like, okay, why did he choose the name Charles III out of the 7 or 8 frickin' names he's got, knowing the history of both Charleses as a regnate name in the English-speaking peoples? He's not a retard, and the people around him certainly are not retards. They chose that name on purpose. I believe very fundamentally, because there was talk some years ago to skip over His Majesty King Charles to William, and then Her Majesty came out later some years ago and said, no, we're not going to skip. What I believe is that His Majesty is knowingly taking all the vitriol and hatred of the crown, all this stuff that's been fabricated, everything, and he's taking it onto himself, and he's going to be the one that is on the throne, the crown, during the beginning of the collapse, on purpose, to take the hits and the blame and all that. It's also a generational transition that's happening, right? He's a boomer, etc., right? And I believe he's going to abdicate sometime. And Rich and Lauren and I talked last week, I think, and then I saw a thing pop up. I think he's taken all this vitriol and all this stuff and all this blame and all this accusation. He's going to abdicate for health reasons. And there's public opinion and all this other stuff stirred up against him. And I think William's going to come in as the king restored. And I think Trump actually at the dinner at Windsor told him, we have your security. We know who the Praetorians are in your ranks, the Praetorian guards. We know who the knives in the dark are that you need to worry about. And we have your security, because one of the things that Trump said at the dinner more than once was that His Majesty is a good king. He made sure to say that, and it wasn't, honey off the tongue kind of a statement. It was a genuine statement. And then what did he say from there? He said, William will be a good king after. Right? So I'll stop there.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. I just want to reference the video that you and I did with Lauren, where we looked at the astrology for King Charles and Prince William. And what she said was something's going to happen. According to her reading of the astrology, something's going to happen in the first 3 months, of 2026, which will result in King Charles no longer being the king. She didn't say he was going to die. She didn't say that, but something's going to happen, and that Prince William's likely to come to the throne. Now, of course, this is not set in stone. It's her reading of the charts. Who knows how things are going to work out? But she's also the one who, Alex, end of July, you and I did a video with her, and she said September's going to be really bad for Starmer, and she picked out September the 30th and September the 10th. September the 10th was when I think Peter Mandelson resigned, or the news came out that Starmer knew about his connections with Epstein. I mean, I'm sure I knew about it. I'm sure both of you knew about it long before Mandelson became ambassador. And September the 30th, nothing public that we know of that was really bad for Starmer. Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see, and people should follow.
Well, if she says it, then I believe it, and you know why.
That's right. Because
it also lines up the war fighting. It's a war fighting. Sport of Kings paying attention guy my whole life, and great game aware guy. But as an unconventional warfare guy, it lines up with the movements we're seeing. Right? The Sport of Kings is winning. And who are the kings right now? There are only 4 that I can see. Now, there might be some others that are not as great kings, but right now on the board, there are only 4 great kings, one of which has been a captive in a cage, Alex, to your point, right? Mm-hmm. So Putin, Xi, Trump, and His Majesty King Charles III. If King Charles III is freed of the Praetorian threat, such that he can act constitutionally as the executive of the English government, right, on behalf of the people, then that is a king. Now, that's not an absolute monarchy, because that's not what we developed in the English system, right? We developed a monarchy, a check and balance on the king, and no absolute monarchy. That was a big fight we fought for 1,000 years, right?
Yeah, but he can dissolve Parliament. And
he can call for elections, but he can also, more fundamentally, His Majesty has the prerogative to go and look and reset the judiciary, which is where the big problem is. And it's what's happening here with the restoration of constitutionality. People can yell and scream about Pam Bondi not doing this or that, and the Epstein list and all this other stuff. Go look at what's happening out of the DOJ at restoring constitutionality in the United States. It's astounding. it has to happen in the United Kingdom as well, because if it goes to actual armed conflict, which the enemy will take us to, we at least need to make sure as close as possible we adhere to our constitutions. And the American Constitution comes directly out of the English Constitution and the Bill of Rights, right? So one of the things I think, give me 1 second. I think one of the things we're trying to work out right now is there a kingly figure in the Indian peoples, Indian and Pakistan, the Indian Pakistani peoples? Because that's a major ethnic group, billion plus people. They're all over the world. They're embedded in all the managerial class. They're being flooded into Ireland and elsewhere. They are the heads of most of the major corporations. None of that was accidental. And so the only way in which we're going to deal with this, now it's, we're shifting out of Qatar. They're not going to be able to use the Islamics for other than just terror, etc. Because the Islamic world said, we don't want this headquarters here. We're not going to be your new city of London. We're not going to do that. Of course, there's still some factions fighting for it. But now the whole argument is over in India and Pakistan, which are nuclear powers as well, right? And now I think we're trying to figure out, is there a king in that area, someone who plays at that level who can be a real power in India?
And you reckon Modi, isn't it?
I don't think I want a caveat. I don't believe Modi's it, but it might be that the conditions necessary for Modi to develop into it haven't shown, as we've been dealing with all these other regional things around the world, the pressure hasn't been brought to bear there such that he proves himself to be or not to be. My suspicion, though, is that he's not.
Stop me if I'm raising the wrong question, but what about that baseball guy who's in jail?
Baseball guy.
I don't want to mention the name.
It's fine. Well, I think we're okay. Cricket, Alex.
Yeah, same thing. Come on.
Oh my God.
The ball with your stick.
Oh my God, yeah. Talking to a European and an American about cricket. This is going to go well. And I don't even like cricket. So
I enjoyed some cricket in Bangladesh, so they took it serious.
They do. Do you know, a few years ago, because I've said my wife is Scottish, a few years ago, Bangladesh and Scotland were playing a cricket match. The joke I was having with my wife is I think both teams will lose because they're really poor when it comes to cricket. Anyway, moving on.
So I don't know. I'm not familiar with the cricketer.
You mean Imran Khan, who's languishing in Israel, who is a sovereigntist? He is a sovereigntist, and he said, before he was in prison, before the coup, and just a little bit about the coup, there was ex-intelligence. She was the former head of the intelligence terrorist unit in the UK, became the ambassador to Pakistan from the UK shortly before he was removed in a coup.
So we have a new type in the English-speaking world. It's these angels, these female angels of death. We got that one. We got Newland. We got Hillary Clinton.
Gina Haspel.
Yeah. And yes, of course, Europe's trying to catch up, but you guys are way behind us, right? Yeah.
But also, before he was imprisoned, he had said, he challenged the British.
Yes.
Are we your slaves?
Yes.
And he was going to go and do a deal with Russia. He wanted negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, a peaceful settlement.
So why did we leave $80 billion worth of equipment and spend 20 years training the Afghans how to fight modern war? And who just moved across the border in 8 different crossings into Pakistan?
Yes, I was going to ask about that. Afghanistan.
We left that force there on purpose, and that capabilities, and we kept paying them $40 million a week. We left that there on purpose to either move against Iran or Pakistan. Turns out it was Pakistan. So it's very interesting what you articulate. I had forgotten about Imran Khan. You're absolutely right. He actually could be.
But he's completely captured and imprisoned.
Correct.
Well,
that's what you do. You put him in the tower.
But then
that
Pakistan is doing I'm sure you'll know, EM, about the ties between the Pakistani military and the US and British military, and of course the ties between ISI, the Pakistani
the ISI, and
MI6.
But that's the Praetorians. It's the Praetorians.
So what would be the point when it seems like the moneylenders have the upper hand in Pakistan, that you then have Afghanistan attack Pakistan using the armament that Biden left?
It's a threat. So you got to remember, they tried to kick off a kerfluffle between India and Pakistan here a couple of months ago, and it got shut down in a day or 2 days.
Yep.
You think they were going to let that stand? So you've got Afghanistan there, and you've got Balochistan as two threats in the area that you can turn on and off to make sure that there isn't a rapprochement between India and Pakistan, and there isn't a kingly figure, right, that emerges in that, because I know one's Muslim and one's Hindu, but you're still the same peoples, right?
Yep,
same
absolutely.
ethnic peoples, cultural peoples, historical
culturally
peoples.
the same. Yep.
Right. So,
But
and I don't know exactly what.
Sorry, Ian. Forgive me for interrupting. I don't know if you know that Urdu and Hindi are very similar.
Yeah.
I understand Hindi, but I can't speak it, and vice versa.
Yeah. So I have friends of mine that I was in the qualification course with, and they went and studied Urdu, and they studied, the languages, et cetera. And they, same thing, right? They can understand 2 or 3 of the languages in the area if they pay close attention, or at least 30, 40%, sometimes more. Yeah. So the one wild card that's left out in the world right now, and we still don't know that the crown in the United Kingdom isn't going to be taken down. That's why they put this, Mahmoud or whatever the hell her name is in charge of MI5, is so they can specifically threaten the royal family and anybody who might be loyal and come to the royal family's defense. Because if you have the royal family under control because of threat of death, then you don't have an executive in the English system. You don't have an executive. All you have is a parliament and a judiciary. Because the crown in the English system is the executive. It's the equivalent of the president in the United States, right? It's the same as we didn't have a president in the United States for the last 40 years because all the Article 2 powers have been suborned to Congress or to the judiciary, or actually straight up to regulators. That's what the Chevron Act was about. Striking down Chevron Act was returning Article 2 powers back to the executive, and legislative law, production of law, back to the judiciary or to the Congress, right? And thereby robbing the judiciary of the ultimate power. In the United Kingdom, and in Ireland, by the way, the ultimate power is in the hands of the judiciary, because there's no executive with the ability to check the judiciary, right? So legislative checks, supposed to check judiciary and executive. Executive is supposed to check judiciary and approve or deny legislative. That's the balance of power. If the executive's taken out of it, who has power? The judiciary, right? So give me a second. So we don't know exactly how it's going to go in the United Kingdom yet. I suspect we're going to have a bloody fight. I suspect a whole lot of us bastard sons are going to come back home and fight for England, right? Scotland, Wales, Ireland, etc. The missing piece, we're not going to get the war with China. It's just not going to happen. The war with Russia is not going to happen. There's nobody left to fight Russia anyways, right? So, where's the one wild card in the world that has the manpower, the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of young men to go fight and kill and die? And, oh, by the way, who understands the system very well, because since the 1700s, they've been management and some high-level management in that system, and intelligence and soldiers, and ISI is everywhere, by the way. ISI is in everything, everywhere, just like the CIA, just like MI6, right?
Very capable.
Very capable, right? So that's the one, until you get a kingly figure, and this is, again, why the whole no kings thing right now in the United States, that's not hyperbole. They know exactly what they're saying, because it takes a kingly individual with nobility and knights to prevent this oligarchic power control. So I'm talking too much now, but Alex, I'm very interested in your thoughts.
Well, that's been the case since Greek antiquity. That's been the case since they killed the last king in Rome, 508 or 509 BC.
Yes.
And the Romans have been obsessed with kings ever since. So if the oligarchy wanted to eliminate somebody, they would just accuse them that he's pursuing kingship.
Yes.
Like the Gracchi brothers, Catiline, Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, he's a
dictatore.
Yeah, and so they would eliminate them, and along with hundreds or even thousands of their supporters, because that's what they had the Praetorian Guards for. They were basically death squads.
Yes.
And this obsession with preventing kings from emerging is now about 2,000 years old, more than 2,000 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And without a king, you have oligarchy whose power is completely unchecked. They get to do exactly whatever they
unaccountable.
want.
Totally
completely unaccountable.
Yeah.
And they put in front. So they're behind the scenes. On the scene, there's the democratically elected leaders, and then
disposables, as I call them.
They screw you, and then they say like, well, but you can get rid of this leader in the next election. So people are like, like this guy's terrible. We're going to get rid of him, and then you elect the next one. And so
but if you get rid of him, then the next guy that comes in is not going to have as much power to fight on your behalf. So you probably want to keep that guy there, even though he's doing all these things that literally should be in prison or should have been shot for.
Yeah, but they prefer that the guy who's in power doesn't have any power at all, right?
Well, no. Well, that's exactly right. And that's also why in late stage oligarchies, right before you go to monarchy, and to prevent a total collapse, because that's how monarchies come, right? It's nobility first, and then out of their nobility emerges, there is elevated a monarch, right? With the people and the nobility elevate. Okay, so as you rush towards the collapse of a complex oligarchic system, the oligarchs put dumber and dumber and dumber and less capable and less impulse controlled people in control everywhere.
Yes. And you can see that becomes very, very obvious. And you see, but interestingly, in our time, we have an almost perfect case study of a nation under oligarchs and a nation under king. It's the same nation. It's Russia. So Russia in the 1990s, when the Soviet system fell,
yes,
Russia came under the rule of the oligarchs.
Yeah.
And so they called it the rule of seven bankers. And so you had these seven bankers that were practically running the country during the 1990s. They nominated prime ministers and ministers. They took them down at their pleasure.
Judges, Duma members, all of it.
Complete stranglehold on power.
Millions of people starved.
It was Russia lost between 3.5 and 5 million people during the 1990s compared to normal population trends. And the mortality increased to a level of a country at war. Half the Russians were living in poverty, and 1 in 4 was in destitute poverty. World Bank figures. Everything was disintegrating. The whole country was becoming Congo, basically. And then Vladimir Putin came to power, and they were very convinced that Vladimir Putin was their guy. Somehow this deception took place. And for probably 2 or 3 years, Vladimir Putin played the role. And he and Tony Blair met 9 times in the first 2 years. And Vladimir Putin got a state visit in the UK. He got to ride in an open-top car with the Queen.
In the century plus,
Yes.
Yeah.
And but then in 2002, I think, Vladimir Putin summons all the oligarchs, 15 of them. He sits them at a big, giant round table, and he lays out the rules. We're not going to nationalize because they all got their billions. They were stolen, basically.
Yeah.
He said, okay, we're not going to renationalize your property, so it stays yours. What you stole, you have, it's yours. Run your businesses. You must, so 3 basic rules. You must pay your taxes correctly. You must treat your employees correctly. Don't treat them like disposable
slaves.
Yeah. And 3, you have to stay out of politics. And that third one was the one that was most difficult for them to accept. Anyway, there were some.
It's not just politics. We got to be careful. I'm terribly sorry, but it's you stay out of politics and government.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Exactly. So they were thrown out of government. Then there were some battles ensued, but legal battles. And
there's assassination attempts on him. There was assassination attempts on his circle.
On Putin, yeah. But basically, the Putin prevailed in all these court cases. In the end, they didn't manage to assassinate him, And in the end, in 2003, the only one of these oligarchs, one of the 7 bankers, who actually got thrown in prison was Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who was the trustee for Jacob Rothschild interests in Russia.
Yeah.
And he spent 9 years in prison, and he's a free man now. But that was a big signal, and the signal was, you guys are no longer in charge.
He wasn't only in prison; he was stripped. He was the only one stripped of all of his assets.
Yeah, correct.
Because it's one thing to go to prison, but he was also stripped of his assets.
Do you know what they have? And this is like a routine business for them. The whole thing is run out of the city of London, but they don't show their hand. So they nominate these trustees.
Yeah,
and then they have these secret contracts with them, where the trustee has the corporations that they own have a protector.
Yep.
And protector is an unnamed person.
Yep.
And then, in Mikhail Khodorkovsky's case, it turned out that the protector was Jacob Rothschild. And that's how we know that who was actually behind all this. And then, I think that this type of a secret contract is illegal in Russia. So that's how they lost their chips there. Yeah, go ahead.
It's also illegal in the United States.
Yeah, I think it should be illegal everywhere. I think it pretty much is illegal everywhere. I don't know. Maybe it's even illegal in England, but it's probably illegal in the city of
absolutely,
London.
It's illegal in England. That's why they have to hold the crown.
Yeah, and that's why probably in the city of London it is legal.
Correct.
Because it's its own jurisdiction.
Correct. It's the same thing with China, etc. So these old civilizational peoples, they're all legal. Their civilizations are built around very old codes of law.
Yeah.
Right? Kievan Rus law goes back to the 900s, unbroken. English law goes back to the 800s, unbroken. And Americans are an extension of that. Australians, New Zealanders, Cuba. Okay. So the master title holder in the English-speaking system, going all the way back to 1088 AD, is the crown. So if you can control the crown with Praetorian guards and knives and assassinations and the threats of assassinations and character assassinations and reputation assassination, etc., you hold the one power that can throw all of that off. Right? That's why the crown falling in the United Kingdom is the worst thing that could happen for the entire English-speaking world. That's why they're going so hard against no kings. Why? Because it worked 400 years ago on the continent of Europe, and it worked in the United Kingdom to bring down the kings who were against this very thing, who had the legal powers and authorities and prerogatives to fight this thing on behalf of the peoples. Right? That's like, I listen to guys I know I respect a lot, right? Intel guys, special operations guys, business guys, banking guys. And I hear all this stuff about Xi, and Xi's going to fall, and there's the 13th plenum, and, whatever, and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, Xi's not going to fall. Xi's going to stand. Xi's going to stand because Xi didn't put himself in power, just the same as Putin didn't put himself in power. Xi's going to stand because what are they doing now with all of this stuff? What are they doing? They are standing up to the empire's last all-out attack, just like Russia's been doing since 2022, right? In violence. Now, hopefully, it doesn't go to that with China, because that gets ugly fast, right? Anybody who's spent time, I was a first group guy. Anybody who's spent any time studying how Far East Asianers fight, you don't want that kind of fight, right? We have these rules and this, Far East Asianers, it's war. It's no rules. Everything's going to go, right? Same with the Indian peoples, right? When it's war, it's war. So my one concern right now is that, and Imran Khan it's Imran Khan, right?
Yeah.
You're right. That's an interesting character because he has all the attributes. The problem is, if I remember correctly, he's Pakistani, and then you're going to have a problem in India. My suspicion is that it may be that we don't know who the Indian person is right now. We don't. But the real kings and the real power, does. Maybe it's Modi. I don't think so, but it might be. It might be that Modi is that guy once the Praetorian problems are removed from him, right? And who would... The only peoples who could actually remove the Praetorian problem from around Modi would be the Pakistanis, would be ISI, some faction of ISI, etc.
Right.
right? So we're not seeing the sport of kings being played out of the Indian, the greater Indian peoples yet. And that still leaves the world in great risk because those are two nuclear powers with very large populations that are spread out all over the world in every community. That's why there's all this interest and effort right now on, of course, they're still going to try the Russia stuff. Of course, they're still going to try the Middle East stuff and Israel stuff and all that. But for all intents and purposes, that stuff's, we're just winding things up there. China's a demon we're not going to take on. If we had all of the world's productivity, including Russia's combined, we couldn't, all of us combined couldn't equal China in 6 months if we tried it for 5 years, right? So it's just stupid and ludicrous to think that we could fight China, right? They could put a million drones a day out into the, you know what I mean? I mean, quite literally, that's not an exaggeration because they don't need to do all the big fancy ones. They can put a million drones a day out. It's not even about the manpower at this point. I mean, that's important too. So the big concern that I have right now is I'm not seeing the sport of kings. I'm seeing the great game still out of the greater India area, but I'm not seeing the sport of kings out of there yet.
And what you're saying fits in with Tom Luongo's thesis, is that how Trump has been playing India has been to push India into the BRICS away from England.
Correct. But it's not so much push it. What people, for anybody who wants to think in the big game board, right? Tom likes to play tabletop games, right? But in the big game, in the sport of kings, it's not so much that we're pushing India into BRICS. That's true. But and it's not that we're pushing them away from the Brit, yes, it is the British because they're occupiers of us English, right?
Yep.
But what are we doing? We're pushing the peoples and the economies into an alignment that they actually already have going back to the 1940s, because it was the Russians, Soviets, who were the ones who backed and supported India for 60 years. Or roughly, maybe not quite 60 years, 50 years. So when once India gained its independence and was going through all of the things that the empire was trying to do to reclaim and retake, its possession through all these nefarious ways, it was the Soviets that actually helped the Indians sustain their independence and to build an economy and to build an independent power structure and all of that. And immense loans that they wrote off and equipment, most of that in weapons and equipment and training, etc. And I know, again, as a first group guy, we were, even in my time in the 2000s, late 2000s into the late 2010s, we were still trying to build those, we were still trying to replace those old Russian relationships in the military and intelligence of India, and weren't doing so well because they go deep, right? They go deep, and they're by nature. India has a fundamental problem. It is a British construct from its beginning, right? And people got to go back to the 1600s. There wasn't a thing called India. There was these different kingdoms. There was the different principalities, the Rajas, the whole concept of India, Greater India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc., is a British construct at every level. Right, from local governance levels all the way up. And so that's a fundamental problem. The British naturally fit in there, this parasitic, peoples. However, there is this interesting thing that the elites in India did partner with, including Pakistan, including Bangladesh, etc., did partner with the Soviets rather than, basically the city of London for 50 years or so. And so maybe that's the counter. I don't know. I'm not. Give another one of these little things that's come to me that somebody says that's like, I'll probably keep that one to myself, right? But I think what we all need to be looking at right now, very seriously, anybody who's on the finance side, as you are, Alex, but and that's where I started from. That's how I started looking at geostrategic stuff, was how do I assess, capital flows and cross-border transactions and IP, all that. Okay. Anyways, forgive me. The point I'm trying to get to is this. I think what we all need to be looking at right now more closely is the greater India movements, because it's the last final chess piece on the board. And by the way, chess was invented in India, for anybody who doesn't know that, right? It is the last final chess piece that is uncertain. And it is actually where the real danger is. The long-term danger, again, because it is a pure British construct for the last 300 some odd years. And does that mean that India breaks up and goes back to what it was before? Does it mean India, to something closer to what was before? Does it mean that India stays as contiguous? Does it mean there's a rapprochement between Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, etc.? I don't know. But it's the big uncertainty right now. I'll stop there.
Yes. Guys, it's hour and a half.
Last point. I want to go back to Russia under oligarchs and Russia under Putin.
Yeah. Oh,
because,
sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
Free flowing conversation. That's fine. But basically, the contrast between Russia under Putin and Russia under oligarchs is so insanely sharp. It's like black and white. It's black and white because Russia under the oligarchs in the space of 9 years, it practically disintegrated. It was one of the most corrupt countries in the world. The average salary of a worker, if he was lucky enough to have a job, was $56 a month. People were malnourished. The diseases, like the infectious diseases, were exploding. Cancer was exploding. Healthcare was
alcoholism, drug use,
suicide was one of the highest, one of the leading causes of death for grown-up men. And on and on and on and on. And then Vladimir Putin comes in after 2-3 years, cleans up the oligarchs. And today, Russia is one of the, on purchasing power parity basis, number 4 economy in the world, right? They are a military superpower. The standard
superpower.
Industrial superpower. It's an astonishing, spectacular turnaround in just basically one generation's time.
It's amazing what a king can do.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. But this is one of the
constitutionally balanced, a power balanced king. But it's a
of course. But kings, they've been brainwashing us all our lives that having a king means that he can just do whatever he wants. But kings are always extremely sensitive to public opinion and to the power of the people, because you see, Vladimir Putin once went kind of against the current, which was in 2014, because in 2014, the Ukrainian abuse of the Russian-speaking people was so bad that the Russians definitely wanted Putin to intervene, and Putin knew that they were not ready, and he didn't want to intervene. And boy, he was lambasted in the media. People were calling him out openly for treason. Some of his own allies in politics and in the media turned on him.
Yep.
And the only way he was able to survive this is because he had a massive political capital built up.
And the oligarchs saw it as an opportunity, and you heard things coming out of the oligarchs about reset.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not true that kings are like, once I'm there, I'm just gonna take any girl I see to bed. I'm gonna execute whoever I like. Anybody looks at me cross, I'm gonna have them tortured.
No.
And it doesn't work that way. It never has worked that way.
That is right.
But what the people get. They get accountability, they get transparency. They know where the buck stops. They know who is responsible for the way things are in the country.
Yes.
And if the king makes one too many bad decisions, everybody around him will turn on him. And it's like dogs. As soon as they sense that the alpha dog, there's a weakness there, they will tear him apart. So the king can allow himself very, very few mistakes.
Yes.
Whereas in democracy, there's no accountability, there's no consequences. You do any old kind of shit, you hide between, system of checks and balances. And then
you steal, you lie, you
lie.
Yeah.
And then when the system's done with you, you retire and you go and spend more time with your family.
And you get a lovely library.
Exactly. You get a love, especially the one like Obama's. That's
really
it's
so
beautiful. So
that's
beautiful.
Like an Empire Strikes Back, kind of building.
Yes, that's like now we're going to spit in your face.
Yeah.
And then
it's a Sith headquarters.
Exactly.
Sorry.
And the kings, when the system is done with them, they usually end up hung or burnt
Correct.
or imprisoned
Correct.
or assassinated or
Correct.
something.
Or they die in their beds because they did it right.
Yeah. Or they die in their beds because they did it right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it makes an extremely compelling case in favor of having kings, having sovereigns. And I have heard such talk from people around Trump. Amazingly, Peter Thiel.
So
He's been
when Peter
talking.
was with PayPal, I was back in Silicon Valley 20 some odd years ago, and at certain parties and certain events and certain things, we were having the conversation about I didn't understand at the time, I don't think most of us did, but it was a recognition that feudalism was the only system that worked, and that it needed to be dramatically upgraded and updated with all the tools and capabilities that we were developing. But the only system that is a counter to this tyrannical centralization of power and control, unaccountable power and control, is the decentralization of feudalism. And to that, you have to have a strong nobility. We call them oligarchs. So we got to be careful there. There are very strong aristocratic noble families, right? Those are different than oligarchs. And noble aristocratic families that act like oligarchs, they've lost their nobility. They've lost, I don't care what the hell they are, right? But we were having this conversation in Silicon Valley at, tech events, not so much tech events, but, the private dinners and parties and things about, feudalism's the only way forward. And there was arguments for a good 15, 20 years about, well, do you need kings? And then it was a matter of, well, who's going to be the moderator between the princes? And you realize you have to have a strong, capable moderator who's got his own checks and balance. So there's a balance of power. So you do need to have somebody that can moderate between the conflicts and forgive my language, with the fuckery of the princes. Right?
Right.
Well, that's what Putin is, and that's what Xi is, and it's actually the system that was built in the United States. So,
Absolutely fascinating.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely fascinating.
Yes, thank you. I think we all agree.
so
Really,
terribly sorry, Alex, to take you away from your chilling. I hope you can go back to it.
No, now I have to go feed my kids because otherwise I'm not going to get to chill at all.
yes, needs to be done, Alex. I'm watching you.
There you go. There you go. The child social worker there.
Yeah.
Don't have him show up at your house because you're not taking care of your kids.
Yeah.
Right. Alex, Ian, thank you so much. I'll have all the links in the description, but I look forward to doing this again at some point soon with the three of you. And if you're watching, please share, spread, subscribe, all that business. Watch out for further videos with EM and further videos with Alex, and look forward to seeing you. And please keep standing for peace and freedom and justice. Rich, Alex, and EM signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.